The first thing I heard when I picked up the phone was sobbing. Not the quiet, polite kind either, the raw, shaky kind that sounds like something deep inside a person has finally given way. "Who did you call?" My sister whispered. Her voice broke mid-sentence. "Mom just got back from the church, and she's clear. Oh my God, she's on her knees in the living room. She keeps saying, 'I handled it. I handled it.'" I was sitting in my car in my own driveway, still wearing the apron I'd been cooking in for 2 straight days. I should have felt guilty. But here's the thing, what happened at that party wasn't about a phone call. It wasn't about a birthday cake or a yard full of folding chairs or 50 guests eating food they never once thanked me for. It started 18 months earlier, with a phone call my own mother made sure I never received. My name is Claire. I'm 33 years old, a certified public accountant who walked away from a corporate office to build her own practice from scratch. My family called that unemployment. This is the story of a birthday party, a junk drawer, and the day I stopped being invisible so someone else could feel important. My mornings used to start at 6 sharp. Coffee, heels, a 40-minute commute into the city, 7 years at a downtown accounting firm, 7 years of tax season headaches, client dinners where I smiled until my face hurt, and partnership meetings I was always invited to attend, but never invited to lead. Then, 18 months ago, I quit. Not a crisis, not a breakdown. I just stopped wanting to build somebody else's firm when I could build my own. My apartment was small. A studio above a dry cleaner with a desk by the window that caught the afternoon light. It was mine. That Tuesday morning, I was reconciling quarterly expenses for a flower shop, my third client, when my phone buzzed. My sister, Jenna, Claire, "Mom says you'll help with my party this weekend. 50 people. She said you're free." I held the phone away from my ear for a second. Not because I was surprised. That's just how it worked in our family. Mom volunteered my time the same way people donate old furniture casually, without asking, assuming nobody else had a better use for it. But Jenna was turning 37, and before she was my sister, she was my best friend. I wanted the party to be good. "I'll cook," I said, "but I need help with setup and cleanup. I can't do all of it alone." Of course. "We'll all pitch in," Jenna said. I believed her. Or I told myself I did, which, looking back, was the same mistake I'd been making since I was old enough to hold a dish towel. I drove to my parents' house Friday evening. 25 minutes on the highway, past the strip malls and the Wendy's where I had my first job at 16. The house hadn't changed. A beige ranch on Clover Lane with a flag out front and a lawn. My dad, Frank, mowed every Saturday like it was his religion. Mom was on the phone in the dining room when I walked in. I could hear her before I saw her, that warm, performing voice she reserved for people who weren't family. "Oh, the fundraiser numbers look wonderful, Pastor. I've been managing the books myself. Everything is right on track." My jaw tightened. I had been managing those books for 3 years. Every receipt, every reconciliation, every quarterly report filed under Helen Mercer. Because Mom's name was on the committee letterhead and mine WAS and single quotes T. She hung up, turned, and saw me in the doorway. "No hello. No thank you for making the drive. Good, you're here." She pointed to a legal pad on the counter. "Grocery list. Start tonight, so tomorrow morning you can focus on the main dishes. 3 pages, handwritten. Appetizers for 50. 3 entree options, salad, rolls from scratch. A 3-tier birthday cake." I stared at the list and realized this wasn't helping with a party. This was full-service catering and paid, unacknowledged, and already assigned. I started at 7 that evening and didn't stop until midnight. Marinated chicken thighs, 2 batches of herb rub, 2 enormous bowls of pasta salad, 3 dozen dinner rolls. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and effort. My forearms ached. Flour dusted the apron I tied on 5 hours earlier. Around 9, Dad wandered in and stood in the doorway watching me knead dough. "Need a hand?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Can you chop the onions for the coleslaw?" He reached for the knife block. And then, from the living room, Mom's voice cut through the air. "Frank, come see this. They're showing the church renovation on the news." His hand stopped. He mouthed the word asterisk, sorry asterisk, and walked out. I chopped the onions myself. Tears streamed down my face, and for years afterward, I let people think it was the onions. At midnight, I washed every pot, wiped every counter, swept the floor. I climbed the stairs to my old bedroom with the track trophies from high school and the framed CPA certificate I brought home to Christmases ago so Mom could finally see it. The certificate sat where I'd placed it, on the top shelf, next to a participation ribbon from a church bake sale. A fine layer of dust covered the glass. Mom had never moved it. She'd also never cleaned it. I set my phone alarm for 5 and closed my eyes. 5 came fast. Back in the kitchen before anyone else stirred, checking the rolls, starting the pulled pork, staggering timers on my phone like a flight controller managing departures. Jenna and her husband, Marcus, pulled up at 10. I watched through the kitchen window as Jenna emerged carrying a bottle of wine and a gift bag. Marcus carried nothing. Smells incredible, Jenna said, hugging me carefully so she wouldn't press against my flour-streaked apron. You're so talented at this, thanks. Can you set up the folding tables in the yard? Mom rented 6. There in the garage, Jenna tilted her head. Let me shower first. Long drive, Marcus drifted toward the living room. I'll just say hi to your dad. Neither came back. I set up all 6 folding tables and 50 chairs by myself, carrying them 2 at a time from the garage to the backyard. Then I went inside to flip the pork, check the rolls, and start the coleslaw. By noon, the yard was set, tablecloth is pressed, napkins folded, serving station assembled. Sweat soaked through my shirt under the apron. I found Jenna in the living room, shoes off, scrolling her phone. Meg, I need help bringing out the chairs. She didn't look up. Mom said you had it covered. I stared at her for a long moment. Then I turned around and went back outside to finish alone. At 2 o'clock, I found Mom in the dining room arranging flower centerpieces, the one task she'd assigned herself all weekend. White carnations in mason jars, humming a hymn while she trimmed stems. Mom, I kept my voice even. I've been cooking and setting up since 5 this morning. I need Jenna and Marcus to take over dessert prep. Jenna has a stressful job, honey. She needs to relax this weekend. I have a job too. She looked up then. That thin smile, the one she saved for. When I said something she found naive, patient, indulgent. The expression you give a child who says they want to be an astronaut. You're the only one without a real job, she said. The way you'd say water is wet, factual, obvious, barely worth mentioning. Then she went back to her carnations. I walked to the kitchen and gripped the edge of the counter until my knuckles whitened. I'd heard versions of this before, pointed comments at Thanksgiving, careful questions at Easter about when I'd go back to a real office, but never this plainly. Never used as a justification for why I specifically should be the one standing in a hot kitchen for 2 days while everyone else sat in air conditioning. She hadn't even said it with cruelty. That was the part that burned. She believed it. I picked up the knife and went back to chopping. That evening, during a brief lull, I opened my laptop on the kitchen counter. The church books were due soon. Numbers were steady ground. Nobody questioned your value when the balance sheet tied. I scrolled through the capital campaign ledger. 3 years of entries. Most were clean. I'd entered them myself. But scattered through Mom's direct entries, something caught my eye. Miscellaneous event supplies, $380. No receipt. Decorations and outreach materials, $290. No receipt. Community event coordination, $450. Same problem. I pulled up a filter. Every expense Mom had entered personally. About 40 entries across 3 years. 14 of them had no supporting documentation. Vague descriptions, round numbers, all reimbursed to H. Mercer. Total, roughly $2,100. I knew what this was. Mom spent her own money on the fundraiser, flowers, flyers, stamps, and reimbursed herself from the campaign fund. That's normal. But she never kept receipts. And if an auditor who didn't know her opened this spreadsheet, they'd have questions. Questions Mom couldn't answer because I was the one who'd been filling in the gaps for 3 years. Building the paper trail she never built. I found Mom in the hallway between the kitchen and the living room. The party humming behind the closed door. Mom. There are about $2,200 in expenses without receipts. The audit is in 2 weeks. I need you to, not now, Andrea. We have guests. This isn't optional. If the committee sees entries without documentation, I handled it. The words came out sharp, final. She turned and walked back to the party. I stood in the hallway alone. The party noise bleeding through the door like pressure in my ears. I tried. That mattered. Because later, when the weight of what came next pressed down, I needed to know I'd given her a chance. She chose the flowers. She chose the thin smile and the hallway exit, and the assumption that someone else, meaning me, would fix it. The party ended around 8. Cars pulled away one by one. Jenna hugged me last. Best birthday ever. Thank you, Claire. Seriously, she meant it. That was the complicated part. Jenna always meant her thank yous. She just never thought about why they were always pointed in my direction. Mom announced she was going to bed. I'm exhausted. What a day. She climbed the stairs without looking back at the kitchen. Dad mumbled something about being tired and shuffled to the bedroom. I started washing. 10 o'clock. 11. The hot water ran out and I switched to cold. My lower back throbbed. Sometime after 11, I stepped away for a moment. When I came back, the remaining dishes were done. The counter wiped, the slow cooker soaking, and on the drying rack, balanced against a clean plate, was a yellow sticky note in Dad's handwriting. Asterisk, I'm sorry, sweetheart. Dad asterisk, I held it for a long time. 2 notes today. One from Mom, one from Dad. I hadn't even found Mom's note yet. That happened Monday morning, when I went looking for a long serving spoon in the deep junk drawer by the refrigerator. Expired coupons, takeout menus, a rubber band ball, dead batteries, a birthday card Jenna had sent 3 years ago, still sealed. And then, under all of it, a small notepad page folded once. Mom's handwriting. Asterisk Richard Calder called. Partner position available for Claire. Told him Claire decided to step back from accounting. January 14th. Asterisk I read it. Read it again. Then a third time, slowly, the way you read something when the words won't settle into meaning. 18 months ago. Richard Calder was the founding partner at the firm where I'd spent 7 years. My mentor, the man who signed my CPA recommendation letter. He had called to offer me a partner position, and Mom had answered the backup number still on file from when I was switching phone providers, and told him I wasn't interested. The previous July, I'd called Richard to test the waters. I thought you'd moved on from accounting, Claire, he'd said. Your mother mentioned you'd decided to pursue other things. The conversation lasted under 3 minutes. I'd never understood his coolness. Now I held the explanation in my head. I folded the note and slid it into my back pocket. I served the leftover cake with steady hands. I smiled. I cleaned the yard. And that afternoon, I sat in my apartment and called Richard Calder. He answered on the second ring. Richard, did you call my parents' house last January about a position? A pause. I did. Partner track. Your mother answered. She said you decided to step away from accounting. Another pause. Andrea, the position was filled in March, but I have a senior consultant opening, solid salary, clear trajectory. If you're interested, I'd like to meet this week. I'll be there. I said that. I hung up and sat with the afternoon sun warming my desk. For the first time in 18 months, the hallway I thought had ended at a wall had a door. The following Sunday, I went to family dinner. I brought a store-bought pie, grocery label still on it. Mom's eyebrow twitched, but she said nothing, which was its own kind of statement. Dinner was pot roast. Conversation wandered until Marcus, reaching for more bread, turned to me. Claire, how's the freelance business going? Jenna said you've been picking up more clients. Before I could open my mouth, Mom cut in. Claire is still figuring things out. She picked up her wine glass. She's the only one without a real job, but she keeps busy. The table went quiet. I set my fork down carefully. The way you set down something fragile when you've decided you're not going to carry it anymore. I need to get going. Thank you for dinner. I stood up. Mom blinked, not worried, annoyed. I walked to the front door and closed it behind me. Not a slam, A click. A latch settling into place. I sat in my car and made 2 phone calls. The first was to my friend Dana. She said it again. I told her. Same words, same voice. Are you going to tell them about the note? Dana asked. About Richard. No, then what? I watched a moth bump against the porch light, stupid with persistence. I'm going to stop doing the job she says I don't have. I hung up and dialed the second number. Gerald Hardman, the church treasurer, a retired banker, careful and decent. Gerald, it's Claire Mercer. I'm stepping down from managing the capital campaign books, effective today. I also need to flag that there are approximately $2,000 to $100 in expenses across 3 years without receipts or adequate documentation. I've been supplementing the records with my own research notes. I'll be removing them when I hand over the raw files. You'll want the audit committee to review everything before the annual meeting. A long silence. Andrea, may I ask, did you know this would happen? I knew that without me cleaning up the books would show exactly what they are. I said, someone has to do it right, Gerald, and someone has to let the wrong things be seen. The audit committee met that Saturday. They reviewed the raw ledger. 14 entries flagged. Vague descriptions. No receipts. Reimbursements to the campaign chair totaling $2,000 to $100. Mom was asked to explain. She tried. I handled it. I've always handled the fundraiser. Gerald told me later she repeated that phrase several times, each time with less conviction, until it sounded less like a defense and more like an echo bouncing off walls that weren't there anymore. The committee didn't accuse her of theft, but the documentation trail was non-existent. Trust, the currency of church governance, was damaged. They asked her to step down as campaign chair pending a full reconciliation the same afternoon. My phone lit up. Jenna. And what came through when I answered was the sound I described at the beginning of this story, the broken, hiccuping sobs of someone whose world had just shifted on its axis. Who did you call? She whispered. Mom just got home from the church and she's Claire. She's on her knees in the living room. She keeps saying, I handled it. I handled it. Dad is just standing there. What happened? I stopped handling it for her, Jenna. That's what happened. But why? Why now? Why like this? Ask Mom about January 14th. Ask her what she told Richard Calder when he called about a partnership for me. Ask her how she spent 3 years presenting my numbers to the church committee and then stood in her own kitchen and told 50 people I don't have a real job. Silence. Then, small and cracked and honest. Claire, I'm sorry. I should have seen it. You're seeing it now. I said. That's enough. Mom called that evening. I answered because there was nothing left to protect. Are you happy now? Her voice was empty. No, Mom, I'm not happy. I haven't been happy in a long time. I was trying to protect you. You weren't ready for. You were protecting yourself. I said quietly. No heat. Just the final line of an audit that had been running in my head for 18 months. If I succeeded on my own, it meant you could have to. And you couldn't live with that. She didn't deny it. I love you, Mom, but I'm done being invisible so you can feel visible. I hung up, set the phone on my desk, looked at the evening light falling across my spreadsheets, my client folders, the framed CPA certificate I'd moved from her dusty shelf to my own wall. The glass was clean. 3 months later, I sat in a conference room at Calder and Associates and signed my offer letter. Senior consultant, benefits, a desk by a window that looked out on the city skyline. Richard shook my hand and said, we should have tried harder to reach you. That's on us too. I didn't tell him it wasn't his fault. It wasn't, but blame is a ledger I'd stop keeping. Mom was removed as campaign chair. The church appointed someone else, a retired school principal with an organized mind and a filing system that made Gerald smile for the first time in months. They also hired a part-time professional bookkeeper, paid from the operating budget. The $2,000 to $100 was eventually reconciled. Mom produced some receipts, wrote personal checks for the entries she couldn't document, and submitted a letter of explanation that Gerald described as sincere but insufficient. She wasn't removed from the congregation. She still attended, but she no longer sat in the front pew or arrived early to arrange the hymnals. She came late and left quietly. And the congregation noticed, the way congregations always notice, with polite silence and averted eyes. Dad called me twice in those 3 months. Short conversations, careful. He never fully apologized. But the second time he called, he asked about my new position. And when I told him the salary, he said, "I'm proud of you, kiddo." His voice cracked on the last word. It wasn't enough. It would never undo 33 years of silence. But it was Frank Mercer's version of everything he had. Jenna took me to lunch at a restaurant in the next town over neutral ground. She cried into her Caesar salad and said, "I never asked because I assumed everything was fine. I'm not going to assume anymore." She did her own taxes that April. Marcus texted me a week after the audit. Asterisk, for what it's worth, I tried to help with the burgers. I should have tried harder. Asterisk, I texted back. Asterisk, you should have. Asterisk, I used to think strength was staying. Showing up at 5 in the morning. Cooking for 50. Smiling while someone called your life a hobby. I thought if I worked hard enough, quietly enough, they'd eventually see me, but that's not strength. That's a transaction where you keep paying and the other person never checks the bill. Strength is knowing the exact cost of what you give and choosing who deserves it. And the quiet ones, we always have the best receipts.